Okay, thank you. And thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Katherine, and I wrote this paper on supporting transitions to expertise in hidden toolbars with my co-authors Carl Gutwin and Andy Cockburn. So what I hope that you'll take away from this talk today is that while currently touch screens with hidden toolbars generally do not support shortcuts for expert users, we can design toolbars to provide such shortcuts by utilizing spatial memory and rehearsing the behaviors that will be used when an expert. So as small touchscreen devices such as personal tablets and smartphones are becoming more commonplace, so are hidden toolbars. When you have such a small screen, you want to be able to maximize the amount of screen that you're going to be using in your main application. So a toolbar that only comes in when you actually need it is very useful, hence why they're becoming common. So an example I have here is the navigation drawers on an Android, where you swipe in from the bezel and select a menu item. And similarly on Windows devices has the charm bar, where again you swipe to open a menu and tap to select an item. And my final example here is not on a touch screen, but it's the same sort of idea. This is Visual Studio. On the left side of the screen there's buttons, and when you click on these buttons, Toolbar slides in so you can get at commands you want to use only when you need them. And this sort of two-action process that all of these examples use demonstrate the trade-off that hidden toolbars present. They do maximize your screen space, but since you have to open the menu, perform a visual search, and then select an item, and you have to do this every single time you want to select an item, this doesn't allow for a quick selection by expert users who just want to get at the command that they're using all the time. And this isn't an unknown occurrence. And there are other interfaces that do have such shortcut techniques. The one you're probably all familiar with, keyboard shortcuts. Instead of using a drop-down menu, Control S to save a file instead of going through the whole menu. And there's been some work in research looking into other ways of doing this as well, such as curtain box marking menus. In this system, you use a stylus tool to open up and navigate a radial menu by drawing a line through the menu system to select the item that you want. And as a user performs this selection over and over, they're eventually going to learn the shape that they're drawing. So if they want to get a frequently used item, they can simply draw the shape without having to bring up the menu first. And then this can be drawn anywhere on the screen as long as the shape is the same every time. And then a similar idea was done a little more recently with a system called FastTap, to use the touch tablet, but also utilize spatial memory. By overlaying a grid-based menu on the application where items stay in the same place, users could memorize their locations over time. So in FastTap, as was shown in the first presentation of our session, a menu in the corner of the screen is held open to bring up the overlay on the screen, and then items can be selected. And then as users learn where these items are, they can select them more quickly by pressing the menu item and the location of their desired item at the same time as coordinated action. And marking menus in FastTap are both utilizing a principle of rehearsal. This is the idea that the selection method should be having the user rehearse the actions they'll be performing as an expert while they're still learning the system as a novice. So what we wanted to do was to use both these ideas of spatial memory and rehearsal to create shortcuts for experts in hidden toolbars that, while still maintaining the idea of maximizing screen space. So if you want to design such hidden toolbars in this way, things you need to consider are how you're going to be opening the toolbar, how to select an item while you're still learning, how to select the item in a faster way when you already know where it is, and if there's any factor of which items are going to be easier to learn. So in order to explore this, we created 4 hidden toolbar designs. Each of them have 4 toolbars, one along each edge of the screen. They have different methods of exposing toolbars and selecting items from them. 2 of them require a visual search of the menu every time a selection is performed, but allow an expert shortcut to get at memorized items faster. So I'll go over these. The first one is what we call button open. those 4 blue rectangles on the screen are buttons, and they need to be pressed in order to open the toolbar. And items can only be selected when the toolbar is open, simply by tapping on them. So a user has to perform a visual search every time they select something, and we don't have an expert shortcut in this method. And this is meant to be something users might be familiar with. It's intended to be similar to the Visual Studio example I showed you earlier. So we have a quick video here. I see just tapping on the blue buttons on the edge of the screen in order to open up the menu, performing a quick visual search, and selecting the desired item by tapping on it. Our second menu is what we call Timeout. For this method, instead of simply tapping, you have to press and hold on the screen in order to expose the toolbar. And then, similar to button open, you perform a visual search, tap to select. And again, for this one, you have to have the toolbar open every time in order to select an item, and there isn't an expert shortcut. However, for this one, since we don't have a static place on the screen where you have to open the menu, it can be opened in any spot along the edge of the screen, which can allow the user to utilize spatial memory to an extent. And then another video here. Pressing and holding along the edge of the screen brings up the toolbar. Tap to select it. Performing visual search each time, but again, allows a little more flexibility since the menu can be opened from anywhere along the edge of the screen. Third menu is the first one that utilizes an expert shortcut. This one is called DoubleTap. For this one, just a single tap near the edge of the screen will open the toolbar, and then double tapping on the item will select it. And then you'll notice that there's an edge of colored bars along the edge of the screen. And this, each of the bars is representing the dominant color of the icon within the menu to help give the user a hint of where the items they're looking for are. So when they do know where it is, the expert shortcut for selecting an item is to double tap on that colored edge. And then the selection will flash briefly just as a confirmation. So currently in the video, this is showing how you would select items as a novice, tapping once near the edge of the screen and double tapping to select. Now it's showing the expert behavior. Instead of having to open the menu every time, simply double tapping on the very edge where the colored bars are in order to select an item. And the final method is called swipe. For this one, again, you tap to open the toolbar, and then for selecting an item, you swipe out towards the edge of the screen and the bezel. And then the expert behavior, even simply, you just have to swipe towards the edge, and the item will be selected and flash briefly as confirmation. And we use the colored bars on the very edge of the screen again to provide a hint, but since you don't have to interact with this one as directly, they're much smaller, save a little extra space. So, final video here, showing the novice way of selecting things first. Tap near the edge of the screen to open the menu, then swipe out towards the bezel in order to select it. And then the expert shortcut here, just wipe out where you know the item is going to be and it will be selected. So to evaluate our toolbar designs, we ran a user study with 24 participants, all of whom ran through each of the 4 methods. They were given a subset of 10 items out of 28 items of the whole system. They would be given a prompt at the middle of the screen to go and find a particular item and select it. And we left it up to them whether or not to use the shortcut behavior, but we went through all the methods and the shortcut method and the novice behavior with them in a practice block, and then they did 12 full blocks of the 10 selections. And we were hoping to find, we also asked them to perform as quickly and accurately as we could, and errors were perfectly fine. They would just be logged. So we were hoping to find out which technique would be the fastest, what errors would be like, would participants actually use the expert shortcuts, and what they would prefer overall. So this chart here is showing selection times. The timeout method, where they did press and hold to open the menu, is showed in orange here. It was the slowest by quite a bit. This is mostly due to the fact that they had to do that holding action. It took a little while. But overall, we found that the methods that provided an expert shortcut, double tap and swipe, which are shown in green and gray, performed the best. They were significantly faster than the other two by about 700 milliseconds. By the final block, that is. For errors, these generally improved over time for all methods, and improved the most in the methods that had an expert shortcut. To be fair, it's mostly because they're making more errors with these. There was about a 4% increase in errors with the ones that provided a shortcut by the final block, which isn't very surprising since it did require reliance on memory. And to be fair, we were asking the users to perform quickly. If this was in a real-life situation rather than the lab, they likely would have been more careful about selecting the precise object they wanted. Then for 3 of the methods, all of them except for button open, the user had the option of opening the toolbar from anywhere along the edge of the screen. So we created a metric that we called distance to see where they were invoking the menu and how many items away it was from their target. And we found that this distance decreased over time for all of the methods, but much more for the methods that that had an expert shortcut. And yes, sorry. And finally, we wanted to know if users were actually using these expert shortcuts, and the answer was very much yes. By the final block, they were using the expert shortcut approximately 90% of the time, and they started using them very quickly. And then we also wanted to look at the learnability of items by location to see if there was any factor there. So this is showing where the subset of items that people were looking for in the swipe method were located around the screen. And we have the items grouped by in a corner, near a corner, or in the middle of the edge. So we found that items that were in a corner were the fastest, and ones that were near a corner were pretty close behind. Corners were selected about 200 milliseconds faster than ones in the middle of an edge. Then we also looked at our distance metric by location as well. And we found that items that were near a corner were actually had the smallest distance. The corners were pretty close behind. And we also found that users use the expert shortcut more often if an item was in a corner or near a corner. So overall, going back to our research questions, which shortcut selection techniques was fastest? Or were they, sorry? And the answer was yes. Swipe and double tap were significantly faster than the other two methods, being almost a second faster by the final block of the experiment. And people also definitely made a transition to using the expert behavior, using it almost all the time by the final block, and we're using it more than half the time, even just by block 3 of 12. Errors were more common when there was a shortcut method. There was about a 5% error rate for shortcut methods rather than less than 1% for the ones that required a visual search every time. But it's worth noting that even in currently existing interfaces that have expert shortcuts, errors are more frequent for those as well. But these are still commonplace interactions and are well liked. And this could also be dealt with in a real-world situation by assigning commands that can be selected via shortcut method as something that can, it's not a big deal if you make a mistake, or you can also implement an easy undo mechanism, perhaps swiping in the opposite direction. And we found that item location did have an effect on how well users were able to learn locations. Corners generally performed best, and users noticed this when we asked them about it. One user even noted that they also used the webcam and Windows button on the tablet as landmarks for learning other items. And finally, which technique did users prefer overall out of 4? it was far and away the swipe method. 18 out of 24 users said it was their favorite overall, and generally users said that they liked it better for speed, memorability, and how likely they were to use the expert shortcuts. Some users even told us that they thought it was fun and would make a good game. So quickly, some future work that could be done in this area. Bezel swipe was a technique that we think is has very good potential, but it's already being used in some other ways, such as the Android and Windows apps that I showed earlier. So we'd have to look at ways to interact with those without interfering. We used 24 items in our menus, or 28, sorry, but we think that users could probably handle up to twice as many and still have enough space for a finger to select it. So that needs to be looked at. And this was a lab setting for our study, and it's worth looking and seeing users use this in a real-world scenario, and if they could even do this, say, on a smartphone one-handed, and if they can turn their phone all the way around and still make it work. So overall, we found that spatial-based shortcuts were significantly faster shortcuts and can potentially improve performance and user satisfaction, and that spatial memory is a powerful shortcut tool, especially when used with rehearsed actions in order to enable transition to expertise. Thank you. That would definitely be an interesting study to try. I think it definitely has potential with it, but it definitely have to try it out to see.
And then if things are mapped to the colors, how would you display toolbars that are purely text-based?
That's a good question. We were using images mostly for memorability, and text would absolutely be a factor in how well someone could remember them. And I think that's something that would have to be done in a future study. It's definitely its own factor.